Welcome back to Race Report, everyone. That's the British Grand Prix done and dusted for 2021, and boy wasn't it different. Firstly, I'll have to apologise for the audio quality of this video. I am recording in my hotel room on my laptop as we speak, so that's why it sounds a little bit different compared to my setup at home. But I'm currently in London after attending the British Grand Prix. But don't you worry, we took a lot of photos, a lot of videos whilst we were there, so I'll be displaying those. There's some from other categories in there as well, some F2 footage, some W Series footage, the whole works, so enjoy. But anyway, let's get stuck into the F1, shall we? It was a bit of a strange weekend for us. It was the very first sprint race for F1, which meant on Friday we had qualifying. And to be honest, I quite liked having qualifying on a Friday. That was really interesting, very different, and it made Friday worth tuning in for, definitely. It did go fairly normally for qualifying. We did see Russell in 8th, which is a fantastic result, especially at the British Grand Prix for a British driver. Excellent. Leclerc did very well, and he, continued this form throughout the weekend. It was also good to see Ricciardo right up there next to Norris as well. But the big talking point was Hamilton out-qualifying Verstappen. That might have been down to Bottas giving him a bit of a tow, which Perez did not do for Verstappen, but it meant that for the sprint race, Hamilton would start on pole, and Verstappen would line up next to him. That set the grid for our sprint race. The sprint race was the talking point of the weekend, going into the whole weekend as a spectacle, because we hadn't done one before. Everybody was interested to see how it would go, what it would look like, how it would feel. I can tell you from a trackside perspective, it felt quite entertaining. It felt like everything you expected to see in a normal Grand Prix race, but turned up to 10, double speed. It might have actually been a bit too quick for us spectators at the race, because it was only 17 laps, so it felt like it was over incredibly quickly. Like we were still digesting some of the incidents, and then 2 or 3 laps had gone by, so you'd missed, 10% of the race whilst you were thinking, man, that incident with Sainz was really interesting. I wonder what caused that. Boom, you've lost a quarter of the race. It was crazy. The action was very good. There was some speculation leading into the sprint race that it would be a kind of dull affair where people wouldn't go for it because they didn't want to damage their cars going into the actual race, but that was definitely not the case. Verstappen beat Hamilton off the line, the McLaren swarmed Perez, and Mazepin managed to hit his teammate. So it was an amazing first lap. And to be honest, that Mazepin thing, didn't even know he hit Schumacher at the start. He was just running very far back from the rest. Didn't think of anything of it whilst I was watching in person. The first incident was Russell tapping Sainz and Sainz going off track. He did manage to rejoin, but it was down the field. That happened just in front of me, which is why I was saying oh man, I've got to digest this, I've got to think about why that may happen. All the while, the laps are counting down and there's not a lot of them to start off with. We also saw Perez slide off the track at high speed. How he managed to keep that out of the wall, I do not know. And how he didn't manage to hit somebody coming back onto the track, I also do not know. He of course remains at the back for the remainder of the race, but it could have been so much worse for him. Alonso had a fantastic sprint race. He was doing everything possible to keep the 2 McLarens behind him, even a bit too much you might say, with his weaving, but it couldn't last forever and he did get overtaken by them and they pulled out a nice healthy lead over him. By the end of the sprint race, the field had separated out quite a bit. You had Verstappen and Hamilton having their battle, and then Bottas trundling around a safe distance behind them, and Leclerc trundling around safe distance behind him. And then the McLarens were kind of in their own field as well. and then there was kind of everybody else bundled in after that. So it was kind of an interesting field because there's always something going on in those final laps in front of you because the field was so separated. It was good. But in the end, Verstappen won the sprint race from Hamilton, and then Bottas came third. They get 3 points for the win, 2 points for second place, 1 point for third, and that is the starting grid for the race. So you have to say Perez and Sainz were the big losers because they qualified, relatively well, and then lost it in the sprint race. So they'd have to make up a lot of ground during the actual race itself. For me, I found it super entertaining. Being there in person, experiencing it was great fun. However, I am left questioning what was the purpose of it? Where is it going to go next? How is it going to go? How is it going to evolve next? I'm curious to find out, but I don't think it can stay as it was this weekend. Now, moving into the race itself, we had a super entertaining first lap. Verstappen and Hamilton were fighting all the way around the lap. Leclerc managed to jump Bottas off the line. McLarens were fighting each other right up until we reached Copse Corner, where Hamilton hit Verstappen. It was a massive incident, and it caused a red flag. Verstappen was out of the race. Hamilton took a 10-second penalty. He was lucky though, he managed to fix the damage on his car at the red flag. Verstappen went to hospital. It sounds like he's okay. I hope that's the case, because it was a big one. That promoted Leclerc into the lead. Hamilton managed to stay in second, Bottas in third. Then the red flag happened, and we had a standing start to get us restarted. After that, everybody was pretty well behaved. We saw Norris jump Bottas at the start, and we saw Vettel spin, but it was just after lighting up his rear tyres. He managed to keep it going, but he was further down the field. Everybody else though was pretty well behaved. Later on, it seemed like Leclerc may be having some engine issues, but they did manage to fix it whilst he was out on track. Don't ask me how that happens, but he managed to do it, and he stayed out in front, crucially, but he was being hunted by Hamilton at that stage. When it came to the pit stops, we saw Bottas jump Norris. Norris had a terrible stop where his right rear wouldn't go on properly, which caused a long stop and allowed Bottas just to jump him just with a normal pit stop. That's got to be gutting for Norris. That's also when Hamilton came in to serve his 10-second penalty. But after that, he was a man possessed. He charged forward, took Lando Norris, and then Mercedes were very kind and moved Bottas out of the way for him. Bottas didn't quibble about that. Well, I guess team orders are alive and well at Mercedes this season now they're in a championship fight. And he hunted down the road to see if he could catch Leclerc and try and win the race. Which he did. He finally caught him and forced Leclerc into a mistake with 2 laps remaining. It was a stunning recovery drive. Whether that recovery drive should have been allowed to happen is a different question. So our finishing top 3 were Hamilton, from Leclerc, from Bottas. I do have to give shout outs to Carlos Sainz, who had a fantastic race, recovering from the damage done to him in the sprint race with that tap with George Russell. And Alonso also just had a brilliant weekend, honestly. He was up there fighting with the McLarens for a lot of it, and he took home a good haul of points for Alpine. It's definitely between them two for my driver of the day, or driver of the weekend even. And I guess I need to give a sad shout out to Russell. Did very well in qualifying, not so great in the sprint race, and then not so great in the race. He finished in 12th place at the British Grand Prix, which is very sad for him. It would have been nice for him to score his first Williams points at the British Grand Prix, obviously, but not this time. But hopefully sometime this season, hey. Overall, it was an action-packed weekend and really good for Formula 1. I think there's a lot to work on, a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of action on track, which is key. But I was thrilled with this weekend. What did you guys think of the race? And what did you think of the sprint race, especially? What were your thoughts on it? Did you like it? Do you think it needs improvement? Let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one.